My wife cheated with our neighbor, so I fell in love with his ex-wife instead. It all started with the smile my wife gave the man who lived next door. At first I thought it was nothing, until I realized she kept that smile just for him. The late-night conversations by the fence, the silhouette in the rain, and the diary I was never allowed to read, all revealed a truth that could destroy my entire family. But instead of facing it, I chose to stay silent, and turned her secret into a weapon to start plotting my revenge. Before I tell you everything, if stories about the quiet storms inside marriages speak to you, please like and subscribe so you won't miss the next chapters. And if anything in this hits close to home, leave me a comment. We don't have to walk through the hard parts alone. My name is Michael. I'm 38, an engineer with the habit of measuring what can't be measured. Angles of sunlight on the driveway, the sharpness of silence at dinner, the distance between two people who share a bed. I've been married to Elena for 10 years. We live on a cul-de-sac where spring smells like cut grass and winter pretends to be mild. Children race scooters in swarming packs, garden flags flop against porches, and the mailman knows which house prefers packages tucked behind the potted fern. Elena has always been the kind of beautiful that sneaks up on you, the kind that doesn't announce itself so much as settle in. Dark hair she cuts herself in the bathroom mirror because paying someone is a crime against common sense. Eyes that go soft around people she loves. She is good with our daughter Sophie, 7 years old and generous with glitter. Our life looks like a commercial for mortgages and back-to-school sales, pancakes on Saturdays, soccer practice on Thursdays, a fridge cluttered with permission slips and coupons no one remembers to use. I don't know when our marriage began to fray. If you asked me for a date, I'd give you a season. Maybe it started with the new project at work, the one that sent me to job sites before dawn and kept me on Zoom calls after dark. Maybe it was the slow, dull creep of routine, the autopilot kiss, the "how was your day?" asked while scrolling, the way we both learned to interpret sighs instead of sentences. I did not feel unloved. I felt backgrounded, like a steady hum you don't notice until it stops. And then Daniel moved in next door. He arrived on a Tuesday with a rented truck and 2 friends who handled boxes like they were light even when they weren't. He looked 40, give or take, in that ageless way fit men carry. There was a shallow scar along his jaw that made him appear like he'd wrestled a few demons and kept one as a pet. Divorced, I found out from the HOA Facebook page, worked in consulting, which can mean anything from spreadsheets to smoke and mirrors. He waved at me across the lawn, 2 fingers, casual, a man confident that friendliness is a form of currency. We did the neighborly dance, the welcome cookies Elena insists on baking, the exchange of numbers in case of emergencies, like the most urgent thing we would ever face together might be a broken sprinkler. He had a dog, Moose, a graying mutt with the good sense to adore everyone. Sophie fell in love instantly. Elena did that thing she does when she wants to be kind, tilt her head, tuck hair behind one ear, offer to help with anything he needed. The first time I noticed her laugh was different around him. I told myself it was the novelty of a new face. New people evoke new versions of us, like rearranging furniture. Everything looks fresher for a while. But novelty should soften. It didn't. On a Saturday when the sun behaved, we held a small barbecue. Daniel brought a bowl of something that claimed to be potato salad and turned out to be addictive. He had a way of looking at you like he'd already decided to like you, which is a wicked power. He teased Sophie about her missing front tooth until she beamed. With me, he asked about beams and load calculations and said he'd always envied people who could make numbers behave. "I make them dance," I joked, and he laughed the way men laugh when they're taking your measure and finding the strands they might pull later. Elena laughed more. Not at him exactly, around him. Her laugh loosened, like a ribbon untying itself. I can't criticize a woman for enjoying a good afternoon in her own yard. But I noticed the way she kept angling toward him, how she wore her blue sundress, the one she puts on when she wants to be reminded she still has summer in her. How she looked at him longer when he wasn't looking and shorter when he was. People think jealousy is an explosion. For me, it began as geometry. I saw the angles our bodies made in space. Elena's shoulder tilting toward Daniel's voice, my feet rooted to the grill, smoke rising like a signal no one read. The more I calculated, the less certain I felt. The week after, I came home late to find Elena and Daniel at the fence, laughing about something I wasn't part of. Their heads leaned in, not touching, but composing a symmetry that didn't include me. Moose pressed his snout through the slats like he could smell my questions. Elena waved when she saw my headlights. She did not step away from the fence. At dinner, the pasta was overcooked. Sophie chattered about spelling words. Elena asked me how my day was with the absent way people ask the weather. I said, fine. I wanted to say, did you laugh like that with anyone else today? I wanted to ask when the last time was she had angled herself toward me. But marriage runs on the fuel of what you don't say as much as what you do. And I had learned long ago that some questions invite truths you can't live with. The next morning, I found her at the mirror applying mascara she only bothers with for weddings or the first day of school. You look nice, I said, meaning it and hating that I meant it. Grocery store, she shrugged. Might stop by the farmer's market after. On a Wednesday? They moved it for the flower festival. She didn't meet my eyes. You know, the one on the community board? I did not know, but Daniel did. I saw him there when I drove past on my way to the site. Faded baseball cap, dog leash looped through his wrist, the kind of patience in his stance that says, I have time for you. Elena, with a handful of basil and the kind of sundress you wear when you remember to be a woman first and a mother second. When she looked up and saw him, there was a brightness on her face I had not installed. I pretended to discover it later when she texted a photo of the bouquet Sophie would love. I did not mention the way Daniel's shape sat at the periphery of another photo she didn't send, but cloud synced anyway. When I asked about her day, she said, productive. And I said, great. And anyone listening to us would have thought we were married and happy. I am not proud of what I did next. 10 years is a long time to trust someone. It's also a long time to assume trust is something you get to keep without polishing it. That night, after Elena fell asleep with a book open like a shield, I picked up her phone. My hands were steady, which scared me. If guilt had hands, mine were holding them. Her text threads were clean. Either she was innocent or she was thorough. But the photos, God, the photos. Not of him, not directly. Elena is a woman who understands composition. She'd captured the curve of a coffee mug on a porch that wasn't ours, condensation beating like a secret in weather. The shadow of a tall figure stretched across the driveway at the hour when our cul-de-sac turns rose gold. A corner of a denim sleeve, a dog's paw on a clean kitchen floor that wasn't ours. And then, sloppy, accidental, devastating, a picture where two hands hovered near each other on a small cafe table, not touching, the space between them small enough to count. My wife's ring flashed, familiar and foreign. The other hand was a man's, tanned with a pale stripe where a ring had been. Everything about that gap between hands screamed relief and restraint. I put the phone down like it might explode. In a marriage, intimacy is not only what you do, it's how close you're willing to get without doing it. I had found the blueprint of a house being built out of almosts. The next day, I tried gentle. I saw Daniel at the market, I said. Seemed like you two hit it off. She didn't flinch. He's nice and helpful. Moose needs walking when he's stuck at work. You walked the dog? Sometimes. There are 100 sentences I could have chosen. I picked the one that sounded least like a plea. Be careful. She set the dish towel down too quietly. Of what? Of making our life feel small. Her face softened then, just a fraction, as if I'd betrayed myself by saying the right thing too late. "Michael, when was the last time you noticed I cut my hair?" I looked at her, at the clean line grazing her collarbone. "Now," I said, and we both knew I'd lost a different argument already. In the evenings, I started noticing the choreography of our kitchen. Elena moved like she was practiced at being alone even when I was there. She hummed softly, an old song from before we had Sophie, the kind you put on when you want to remember who you were. I stood where I always stand, next to the counter with the nick we never sanded out, and felt like a visitor admiring how well everything still functioned without me. Then came the fence. You don't realize how intimate a fence can be until you watch two people stand on either side of it, pretending it's a wall while making it a bridge. Through the kitchen window, I saw Elena and Daniel exchanging something, probably a recipe, possibly a joke, definitely a look. Moose wagged his tail like a metronome marking their rhythm. When Elena laughed, it lifted her chin the way it used to lift for me. "Hey, Dad!" Sophie yelled from the living room. "Can I show Daniel my drawing?" I swallowed something bitter. "Ask your mom." Elena glanced back toward the house, then waved Sophie out like an usher granting seats in the front row. Daniel crouched to Sophie's height, took the crayon galaxy seriously, pointed at stars he pretended to know. I wanted to be the generous man who appreciates a good neighbor with good knees. I wanted to be that man so badly I could taste the alloy of it, sharp and metallic. The night it rained, I came home early because the job site closed down. The house smelled like rosemary and a candle I didn't buy. Elena was not there. On the counter lay a note. Book club, don't wait up. Book club meets on Thursdays and is actually a club, not one of those euphemisms people use when they're tired of being honest. But it was Monday. I told myself she had rescheduled. I told myself a lot of things. Then I did the thing I would judge another man for. I went to the driveway, sat in the car with the engine off, and waited. When her headlights cut the street sometime after 10, my body did something it hasn't done since college finals. I braced for impact. Elena parked with the carefulness of someone who wants not to be noticed by machines that cannot love you. She stayed in the car a few extra breaths, the interior light painting her face in soft gold. Then, as if rehearsed, Daniel's truck eased to a stop along the curb in front of his house. He got out holding an umbrella. He didn't go to his door. He went to hers. Their voices were indistinct through rain, the kind of murmur that only means one thing when night listens. He tucked the umbrella over her as she stepped out. He reached to adjust her scarf. When did she start wearing scarves? Fingers brushing that sensitive place where neck becomes shoulder. Elena closed her eyes for a heartbeat, I counted. No kiss, no touch that would break the law of the cul-de-sac. Just the suggestion of one, waiting politely for privacy. I went inside through the back, like someone who no longer belongs to the front. When Elena came in, she shook out her hair and smiled like she'd run into an old friend at the grocery store. "Hey," she said. "You're home early." "Rain," I said. "How was your day?" "Wet." My voice was a coat left on a chair. She watched me a second longer than necessary, then turned away. "I'm going to shower." In our room, her journal lay half-tucked under a sweater. Elena keeps lists everywhere. Groceries, gift ideas, all the ways a family runs because a woman refuses to let it stall. I told myself it was a list. I told myself the kind of lie you can swallow with water. It wasn't a list. He looked at me like I was a new season, the first line said. Not the girl I used to be, not the wife I am, but a woman who could still begin again. When he held the umbrella over both of us, I felt something shelter inside me I haven't felt in years. I closed the book and put it back exactly where it had been, like a thief who wants to believe he is only a witness. The shower in the next room ran like applause. That night, sleep was a stingy landlord. I measured the ceiling with my eyes, mapped cracks I had never noticed, counted the rotations of the fan. Beside me, Elena breathed the steady breath of someone who could still trust the dark. I made 3 promises to myself. 1, I would not accuse her without proof I could hold in my palm. 2, I would fix the things I could fix, show up, look up, speak first. And 3, the promise that felt more like a threat. I would not be the only one who knew what was happening to my life. Somewhere, there was another person who knew Daniel's gravity, who had already paid for orbiting it. If she existed, she might be my map out of this. Morning made ordinary of everything. Sophie forgot her lunchbox. Elena ran it to the car in slippers. I offered to pick up salad on the way home. The world, shameless, does not pause for heartbreak. But as I watched Elena pull out of the driveway, her face bare and beautiful in the honest light of day, I understood something I had been ducking for weeks. Her smile had learned a new language, and she was fluent. If you've been here, if you've felt the shape of this particular dread, tell me in the comments. And if you want to hear what I did next, make sure you're subscribed. Because the next part isn't about a fence or an umbrella. It's about finding the one person who could help me make sense of the ruin, and then deciding what to do with it. They say the smallest details are what betray us. For me, it was the way Elena's laughter stretched a little too long when Daniel was near, and how her silence at home stretched even longer when he wasn't. At first, I tried to convince myself that what I was noticing wasn't real, that I was just tired, overworked, projecting insecurities onto a marriage that had already weathered 10 years. But doubt, once planted, is a weed. It doesn't stop growing just because you want it to. I became an observer in my own life, watching Elena the way one studies a stranger in a waiting room, attuned to every gesture, cataloging every shift in expression. When her phone lit up on the counter, I found myself glancing at the name, even if she picked it up too quickly to read. When she said she was going to the store, I noted the extra layer of mascara, the careful choice of shoes. When she came back, the groceries were real, but the smile she wore wasn't for me. It's strange how suspicion changes the air inside a house. Sophie still chattered, homework spread across the table, her drawings taped proudly to the fridge. But between Elena and me, silence grew roots. We spoke about logistics, bills, schedules, carpools, but not about the ache pulsing between us. One night, after Sophie went to bed, Elena sat across from me at the kitchen table scrolling her phone. The light cast her face in a glow that made her look younger, freer. She chuckled softly. "What's funny?" I asked. She locked her screen and shrugged. "Just a recipe." I nodded, but my stomach twisted. I'd seen the way her face softened just before that laugh. That wasn't a recipe's laugh. That was the kind of laugh people save for conversations that make them feel alive. If you've ever noticed someone you love change in subtle ways, their smiles, their silences, you'll know exactly what I mean. If this is striking a chord with you, tap the like button so I know these stories matter. And share your own thoughts in the comments. I read every one. The first undeniable crack came from a photograph. Elena had started using our shared tablet to browse Pinterest, recipes, decor ideas. One evening, when Sophie borrowed it for a game, I opened the gallery to delete her accidental screenshots. That's when I saw it, a picture Elena had clearly forgotten to delete. It was a cup of coffee, artfully captured in the afternoon light. But the background betrayed her. Daniel's porch, his unmistakable blue door, Moose's leash curled neatly by the step. The second photo was of flowers at the market, harmless enough, until I noticed a sliver of denim sleeve in the corner, and the shadow of someone standing close enough to touch her. I wanted to believe it was coincidence. I wanted to be the kind of husband who trusts. But the evidence was starting to write its own story. That night, while Elena showered, I opened her journal. I knew it was wrong. But when you already feel like a stranger in your own marriage, what's left to lose? At first, it was just lists, groceries, reminders. But then I turned a page, and my breath froze. He makes me laugh in a way I forgot I could. It feels dangerous, but it also feels like remembering who I used to be. Today he brushed the hair from my face and didn't move away right away. I don't know if he knows how much that meant. Maybe I shouldn't know either. I closed the journal so quickly the sound startled me. My chest pounded. My hands shook. It wasn't proof of an affair, not yet, but it was proof of something else. Proof that Elena's heart had started leaning in a direction that wasn't mine. The more I watched, the more I saw. At the fence, she lingered. At dinner, she drifted. In bed, she slept, facing away. One rainy night, I sat in my car longer than I should have. Elena had claimed book club, but book club was Thursday, and it was Monday. I watched her pull up in our driveway just as Daniel's truck rolled in beside his house. He stepped out, umbrella in hand, and walked her to the door. His fingers brushed her scarf as he adjusted it against the rain. She closed her eyes. Just for a second, no kiss, no scandal. Just enough intimacy to feel like betrayal. Inside, she smiled at me as if nothing had happened. "You're home early." "Rain shut the site down," I said. "How was your day?" "Wet," I muttered. She disappeared into the shower, leaving me with the echo of that umbrella, that touch. That was when my suspicion hardened into resolve. If she was building a secret life with Daniel, even if it was only built on almosts, I needed to know who else had been broken by him before. Because men like Daniel didn't appear in cul-de-sacs without leaving wreckage behind. And if I could find that wreckage, maybe I'd find my way to fight back. They say if you want to know who someone truly is, you should ask the person they've already broken. That's what led me to Rachel. After that rainy night, I couldn't sleep. The image of Daniel tucking Elena's scarf against her skin replayed like a cruel film loop. Not an affair in the physical sense, not yet. But the intimacy of it, the tenderness, was worse in some ways. A marriage can sometimes survive a mistake of the body, but a betrayal of the heart, that's a different kind of death. I kept thinking about Daniel. Who was he really? Why did a man his age live alone in a house too big for one person? What happened to the wife I'd once overheard him mention? One night while Elena was upstairs brushing Sophie's hair, I sat at my computer. Google can be a cruel friend. It shows you what you want to see and what you're terrified to find. It didn't take long. Daniel's name wasn't common, not in our county. Old records popped up, marriage certificates, property transfers, divorce filings. Rachel Thomas, 36. Married to Daniel for nearly 12 years. Filed for divorce 3 years ago. Grounds: irreconcilable differences. But buried in the paperwork were notes: infidelity, financial secrecy, emotional abandonment. My chest tightened. The trail of destruction wasn't hard to trace. It took me another week to find her. A Facebook profile, private but not locked enough. Photos of a woman with auburn hair, sharp features softened by sadness. A little boy in her arms. I hesitated. What was I doing? Was I really about to reach out to the ex-wife of the man who might be destroying my own marriage? Yes. Because when you're drowning, even another drowning soul can feel like a lifeline. We met in a cafe halfway between our towns. I arrived early, palms sweating, rehearsing what to say. When Rachel walked in, I recognized her instantly. Not from photos, but from the weight she carried. the weight of someone who's been forced to smile while their world fell apart. She sat down across from me, folding her hands around a coffee cup. Her eyes searched mine before I spoke a word. "Let me guess," she said quietly. "It's Elena, isn't it?" I froze. "How did you—" Rachel's laugh was sharp, bitter. "Because it's always someone. And I've seen the way he looks at women, the way he pretends to fall in love. He hasn't changed." I swallowed hard. "And for you, it was Daniel?" Her jaw tightened. She didn't answer right away. Then, "It's always Daniel." She told me her story, piece by piece. How Daniel had charmed her when they were young. How he made her feel like the only person in the room. How that attention eventually dimmed, replaced with lies, debts, late nights with excuses that never added up. "I found out about the others in fragments," she said, stirring her untouched coffee. "Receipts, messages, little things. He'd look me in the eye and still deny it. And the worst part? I wanted to believe him, because believing him meant I didn't have to admit I'd wasted 12 years of my life." Her voice cracked, just once. Then she straightened. "He ruins people, Michael. He ruined me. And if he's with Elena—" I nodded, staring into my cup. "Then he'll ruin her too." But I wasn't ready to admit the darker truth, the one clawing at my ribs. I wasn't afraid of Elena being ruined. I was afraid of being replaced. Rachel leaned in. "So why are you here? What do you want from me?" I met her gaze. "The truth, and maybe a way to stop him." She studied me for a long moment, then sighed. "You're not the first husband to come looking for answers, you know. But maybe you'll be the first to do something with them." For the first time in weeks, I felt less alone. Not healed, not safe, but no longer drowning by myself. We sat there in silence for a moment, two strangers bound by the same betrayal, sipping coffee that had long gone cold. And in that silence, a seed of something dangerous was planted. Not love, not yet, but an understanding so sharp it could cut. Betrayal makes strange allies. Rachel and I weren't supposed to meet. We weren't supposed to share secrets over coffee. But pain recognizes pain, and ours fit together like jagged pieces of the same broken mirror. The first few times Rachel and I met, we told ourselves it was just to compare notes, that we needed to understand the patterns, the lies, the ways Daniel and Elena were moving in secret. She knew Daniel's tells, how his voice dropped when he lied, how he always tried to distract with a joke, how he'd spin half-truths into stories that felt too good to question. I knew Elena's patterns, the way she lingered by the fence, the new perfume that wasn't for me, the excuses about errands that stretched later and later. Together, we began to map their betrayal like detectives tracing a crime. But what I didn't expect was the ease with which Rachel understood me. "You keep thinking you should have seen it sooner, don't you?" she said once, her eyes sharp but kind. I nodded. "Yeah, like I failed some test I didn't know I was taking." She smiled sadly. "That's exactly how I felt too." It was dangerous, the comfort I felt sitting across from her. Dangerous and addictive. We started small, a shared document where we logged movements, excuses, dates that didn't line up. Rachel showed me texts Daniel had once sent her, the same jokes he now used on Elena. I showed her entries from Elena's journal, lines that made Rachel shake her head with grim recognition. "He always says things like that," she muttered once. "Like he's the only man who's ever seen the real you. It's his script, Michael. He's not original, he's just practiced." The anger in her voice matched the burn in my chest. For the first time, I wasn't alone in my rage. One night, as we sat in her car outside a diner, rain sliding down the windshield, Rachel turned to me. So what's your end game? Do you want Elena back, or do you want her gone? The question hit harder than I expected. I don't know, I admitted. Part of me still loves her. Part of me wants to burn it all down. Rachel nodded slowly. I felt the same with Daniel. Love and hate. They're closer than people think. She reached over, placed her hand lightly on mine. Not romantic. Not yet. Just human. But even that touch carried heat. That was the night we stopped calling it tracking. We started calling it what it really was. A plan. Rachel was sharp, strategic. She suggested ways to quietly gather proof, financial records, photographs, inconsistencies in their stories. I knew Elena's schedule well enough to anticipate her lies. Piece by piece, we built a case. Not for court, necessarily, but for something better. Leverage. We won't scream, Rachel said, eyes gleaming. We won't beg. We'll make sure they leave with nothing. No house, no sympathy, no victory. Her words lit a fire in me. Revenge didn't have to be loud. Sometimes the cruelest revenge was silence and precision. Yet, in the middle of plotting, something shifted. Rachel laughed once, at a memory of Daniel fumbling through a lie, and I caught myself smiling with her. Really smiling. The kind of smile I hadn't given Elena in months. The realization scared me, because wasn't this how it always started? A smile, then a laugh, then something else. I pulled back, but Rachel noticed. Don't worry, she said softly. I'm not here to replace anyone. I'm here because I know what it feels like to be replaced. Her honesty disarmed me. And maybe in that moment something fragile and dangerous began to grow. Not love, not yet, but a spark. The next step was riskier. Rachel suggested a test. Let's give them just enough rope, see what they do with it. So we staged little opportunities. I told Elena I had an overnight job out of town when I didn't. Rachel told Daniel she'd be gone for the weekend with her son. And then we watched. Sure enough, Elena's car wasn't in our driveway that night. Daniel's lights were on. Shadows moved across his blinds. Rachel sat beside me in my truck, her hands clenched in her lap, eyes shining with fury and hurt. There it is, she whispered. Proof. But what I felt wasn't just fury, it was clarity. They thought they were writing their love story in secret. But really, Rachel and I were the ones holding the pen. Revenge doesn't come in fire or shouting. It comes in silence, in patience, in letting them believe they've won, right until the moment everything crumbles beneath them. The night we gathered the final proof, Rachel and I sat in her living room surrounded by photographs, text logs, and copies of Elena's journal pages. Sophie was asleep at my sister's house. Rachel's son was with her parents. It was just us, and the evidence of two people who thought they could rewrite our lives without consequence. Are you ready? Rachel asked. Her voice was steady, but I saw the tremor in her hands. I nodded. More than ready. We timed it carefully. Divorce attorneys were contacted quietly, assets traced, joint accounts documented. I froze our bank card the morning after Elena spent an afternoon shopping. Rachel did the same to Daniel's accounts. Then came the reveal. I didn't storm into a confrontation. I waited until Elena returned one night, her hair damp from a shower that wasn't taken at home, her perfume faint but unfamiliar. She kissed Sophie's head, tucked her into bed, then walked into our bedroom like nothing was wrong. That's when I slid the folder across the bed. What's this? She asked, her smile faltering. Proof, I said quietly. She opened it, eyes scanning photos of her car parked outside Daniel's house, text messages Rachel had forwarded, the journal entries she'd forgotten to hide. her face drained of color. "Michael, I held up a hand. Don't. I don't need excuses. I don't need lies. What I need is for you to understand something. You don't win." Her lips trembled. "What does that mean?" "It means you'll walk away from this marriage with nothing. The house is mine, the accounts are locked, Sophie stays with me. You wanted Daniel? Fine. But you don't get the life we built together." Tears filled her eyes. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Meanwhile, Rachel was delivering her own blow. She told me later how she'd waited until Daniel returned home, smug and careless. She placed the folder in front of him the way I had with Elena. "You think you're clever," she told him, "but you're just predictable. And now, you're finished." Daniel tried to charm her, tried to laugh it off, but Rachel had already filed motions, already secured her assets, already cut him out. By the end of the week, both Daniel and Elena were scrambling, desperate, broke, clinging to each other like survivors of a shipwreck. But the cruelest truth, they weren't survivors. They were just two people who had mistaken betrayal for love. Rachel and I met in the park a week later, watching her son and Sophie chase each other across the playground. "They're adjusting better than us," she said softly. "Kids are resilient," I murmured. She smiled faintly. "And us?" I didn't answer right away, because the truth was complicated. We weren't lovers, not yet. But we were something more than allies, something forged in fire and betrayal, something neither of us had asked for, but both of us needed. Finally, I said, "We'll figure it out, one step at a time." Rachel nodded, and for the first time in months, I felt a fragile kind of peace settle in my chest. That night, as I tucked Sophie into bed, she asked, "Daddy, is Mommy coming home?" I kissed her forehead. "Mommy has her own home now, but I'm here, always." Her small arms wrapped around my neck. "I'm glad you're here." And for the first time, I believed I could be enough. Daniel and Elena drifted further from our lives, clinging to each other in their ruins. They had gambled and lost. Rachel and I? We weren't a fairy tale. We were something stronger. Two broken people who had chosen not to stay broken. Because sometimes the sweetest ending isn't finding who you thought you loved. It's finding the person who stood beside you when the world fell apart. They say time doesn't heal everything, but it does give you space to breathe. And sometimes, space is all you need for love to grow. 2 years have passed since the night Elena walked out of my life with a suitcase and silence. 2 years since Daniel's charm finally collapsed under its own weight. They moved in together at first, I heard. But within a year, cracks appeared. Neighbors whispered of shouting matches, of bills unpaid, of two people who discovered that betrayal makes a poor foundation for love. Rachel and I didn't rush. We spent months as friends, as co-parents navigating weekends and school pickups. Slowly, Sophie and Rachel's son became inseparable. 2 children who had found family in each other long before we dared to name it ourselves. And then, one evening, as we sat on her porch watching them chase fireflies, Rachel reached for my hand. This time, it wasn't strategy, it wasn't survival, it was choice. Now, the house that once echoed with silence is filled with laughter again. Not perfect, not without scars, but real. Sophie smiles more. I smile more. Rachel smiles too, but not the polite smile of a woman pretending. The kind of smile that begins in the eyes and ends in the heart. Sometimes when the kids are asleep and the world is quiet, Rachel and I talk about the past, about the pain, the betrayal, the nights we thought we'd never survive. And every time we come back to the same truth. We didn't survive because of revenge. We survived because we found each other in the ashes. Elena and Daniel, their names we rarely speak. Ghosts in a story we've outgrown, because the real ending wasn't their downfall. The real ending was our beginning. If this story touched something in you, if you've ever walked through heartbreak and come out stronger, don't forget to like this video, subscribe for more stories, and share your own thoughts in the comments. Your stories matter, and I'd love to read them.